before we get started here. Ultimately, we've got a great panel, a group of speakers and panelists that have been assembled once again for our sessions, and certainly are really excited about the speakers that we have coming forward and the content that they will be sharing and so forth all of this morning. I'm Leonardo McClarty, and I'm the president of the Howard County Chamber, and certainly pleased to join once again Larry Twill with the Howard County Economic Development Authority, as well as also Jennifer Jones representing Howard County Executive, Dr. Calvin Ball. And certainly this has been a great partnership that we've been able to cultivate and establish. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to Larry to bring forth some opening comments, and then we will hear from our county, Jennifer, as well as our recorded video from our county executive, and then proceed with introductions of our speakers today. So, Larry.
Thank you, Leonardo. Appreciate the opportunity and the partnership that allows us to really serve our small business community. We kicked off this series last week with some great speakers and some great topics, and happy to be a part of it again this week, and looking forward to the subsequent chapters the rest of the Wednesdays this month. But it really is these times are really hurting our small businesses, and being able to bring topical issues in front of our small businesses to help them learn, train, adapt, pivot is really key. And this week looking forward to our speakers, because it really is focused on pivoting and funding and innovating in these strange times that we find ourselves in. So thank you for your partnership and working together on it. And we're really on behalf of the county and the county executive, we appreciate the relationship with the county executive's office, and we work very closely with the county executive, and particularly Jennifer Jones, who is Deputy Chief of Staff, and Economic Development and Small Business Matters are in her portfolio. We really appreciate that relationship. And I'd like to introduce Jennifer to introduce the county executive. Jennifer?
Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Leonardo. As Larry said, I'm Jennifer Jones, Deputy Chief of Staff to County Executive Calvin Ball. And I'd like to thank everybody for attending. Making sure businesses thrive in Howard County is one of the county executive's top priorities. And so we've been doing this series so that we can kind of get through this pandemic together, and then when we get on the other side, actually thrive. And so it's really important that the businesses here learn how to operate in the post-pandemic environment. And we hope that this series gives you tangible recommendations for your innovative marketing strategies, and also topics related to financing and access to capital. So thank you, and thank you for the partnership, Leonardo and Larry.
Thank you. And with that, Taylor's going to now share remarks from our county executive.
Good morning and welcome to the Small Business Seminar Series. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce and EDA for this collaboration. As you know, the last several months have been a challenging time for our businesses. We're dealing with the current crisis and preparing for long-term recovery. Businesses need to pivot in a way that is conducive to short-term survival and also to long-term resilience and growth. Post-pandemic, we will need to find creative ways to implement new, innovative marketing strategies. Understanding your business market and having a plan for success is important, especially for small business owners. Most notably, this includes navigating shifts in global marketing and content strategies, reassessing budgets and managing new remote work dynamics, and thank you for attending. This seminar will help you identify gaps in marketing strategies and leave you with tangible recommendations for moving forward in a post-pandemic environment.
Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. And again, I want to say thank you to our county executive for his continued support of business here in Howard County, and certainly of the Chamber and EDA and so forth. Next, I'm going to actually bring some remarks on behalf of our premier sponsor, and that is KCI Technologies. And so KCI, just a little bit about KCI, if I can advance our slide here. Here we go. So KCI provides comprehensive engineering, planning, and construction services. They are a 100% employee-owned engineering, planning, and construction firm that services clients throughout the United States. They have a multi-discipline service offerings, which allows them to provide exceptional turnkey expertise to federal, state, and local government agencies, as well as institutional and private sector clients. Their stock value continues to increase of more than 6,500% since 1994, and ultimately is a tribute to the hard work and technical expertise of their more than 1,700 dedicated employee owners. And so Chuck Phillips, who is the Senior Vice President of Facilities and Site Management, is both the chair of the Chamber this year, but also sits on the board of the Development Authority and is extremely active here in the Howard County community, and continues to just be a great partner, again, of ours, and to those in business, as well as, quite honestly, those in elected office. And so, again, we thank Chuck and KCI for their continued support. And so with that, we are now going to proceed to the, I think, one of the many highlights of our morning. And so it is my pleasure to introduce to you our featured speaker this morning, which is Dr. Anuja Sonelkar. And she is the founder and CEO of Steer Tech. And Steer is focused on developing secure self-driving technologies that will massively enable situationally aware, cyber robust, automated driving applications. Dr. Sonelkar brings experience from both the automotive industry and cybersecurity sector. And prior to Steer, she headed the automotive security group in the cyber innovation unit at Battelle, where she patented and led advanced research in vehicular environments and transitioned to market strategies before moving into TowerSec, an automated cybersecurity company where she was the vice president of engineering and operations. During her career, she has established collaborative research efforts and strategic partnerships, provided project management, and helped set the strategic direction for the commercialization of technology. Dr. Sonelkar is currently the vice chair of the SAE Vehicle Cybersecurity Systems Engineering Committee and co-chair of the ISO SAE Joint International Standard on Automotive Cybersecurity Framework. She also serves on the board of directors of the Economic Development Authority of Howard County. She holds a PhD in electrical engineering from the University of Maryland, College Park. And so, so outside of saying she's an extremely nice woman, she's very smart. And so, so what better person to kick off our conversation on innovation than to introduce to you Dr. Anuja Sonelkar. So Anuja, the floor is yours, or rather the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Leonardo and the Chamber, for the opportunity today. I apologize for that big, long bio, but in the short of it is I've had a lot of fun building the things that I've enjoyed building and working on, some deep technologies. And I've had the opportunity to do all of that, most of that in Maryland here. So I think, my success is a team event, and I've had lots of good mentors and people who have shown me the right, approach and things in life. And I'm very thankful for that. So I am a big proponent of innovation, a big proponent of paying it forward, and also a big proponent of local community because the local community have championed me. So, today I wanted to share a little bit about the Steer story, where we started, where we are today, and how, we can work together with the community. And I would like to, share my screen and let me see if I can do this right. Until the technology works, it doesn't work. So before we start, I would just like to show you a short video of what Steer is about in a nutshell. So this is an automated vehicle. This is actually a stock vehicle that you can buy from your local Apple, Lincoln, Ford, or anywhere else. And we've retrofitted our technology onto this vehicle, and now it can go driverless. You're seeing the car drive. It can navigate turns. It can avoid pedestrians, very important. And it can find an available spot. And once you have a mission like go park, it will go and find an available spot and park itself. And any other obstacles in its way, it will know. It has the intelligence to navigate and solve problems. So if somebody else is in the way, somebody's backing in, somebody's backing out, it can do all of that. Intersections, it can handle intersections. We have some more interesting videos on our Instagram and our Facebook if you want to take a look, where some pedestrian scenarios are there. But I chose this one just because it has a broader application. So this particular video shows you when somebody's second guessing themselves and changing their mind, the car will pause and halt for them. I apologize if the video looks choppy on your end. This is a, video plus Zoom is not the best combination. And that's how it parks. And similarly, if you summon your vehicle back, it will come back to your destination to pick you up.
And Nusha, just a quick question. If a panelist can't see the video, is there anything they can do on their end?
Oh, if they cannot see the video, are they able to see my screen? What are they able to see?
Let me ask them, because I mean, obviously we can see you just fine, but let me inquire.
So if they're dialed in on the phone and they can't see a screen, then I can point them to this video.
Okay.
You can share it after and they can.
Okay.
That's the interactive video, I think.
Okay, Anuja. So I just figured out what it is. She doesn't know that the steer is actually you. She can see you, and she said, I could see the video, but I see this advertisement of a car driving on the left side." Okay.
So that,
I'll take it from here.
thank you. All right. So that was in a nutshell. And what is making that happen is this kit on your left that gets retrofitted onto an existing car. And you can do several things with your car, like drive it. That's our flagship product. And we also have a fast, pull in, pull out. And we have a home garage automation where you can automate in your home. This is all our direct to consumer user focused side. We also have a fleet version. So this is all the home automation. You've probably seen some news about our collaboration with the world's largest garage door opener, Chamberlain. So your MyQ, Chamberlain, Craftsman, all these garage openers work with the steer kit. And this is the valet mode, which I just showed you a video of. But beyond this valet mode, there is also a fleet and commercial operation we run. So we can do offsite automated parking when parking lot management with this technology. You can have multiple vehicles being parked. We're also working with the United States Air Force, and we're doing automated personal transportation, vehicle operation management on air bases. So we were a finalist in the AFWorks challenge. And so this is some of our commercial end product. So that's a steer in a nutshell. But why I want to get that out of the way is I want to tell you where we started and how we were able to come to this point. So we're actually a local company. We started in the Maryland Innovation Center, which used to be called the Maryland Center for Entrepreneurship back then. And we built a technology that could go on to car. But we started a small pilot here in this region, in the Howard County region. We picked up about 8 places. We were at the Maryland Center, and then some shopping malls and the train station. The Baltimore Washington International Airport was a big champion for us. And so we were able to test and perfect our technology at the airport. Then we had the Howard Hughes Corporation. So that became our biggest competitive advantage, is to have an actual deployment region where we could put our technology. So we went from this at the Maryland Innovation Center to building out the core technology to actually making it a working product on vehicle. And then we partnered with the Howard Hughes Corporation to realize a new vision for the Meriwether District. So what you're looking at is, this is how the future of the Meriwether District. You could be anywhere in the district, and you can have frustration-free living, working, and entertaining. Your car will go and park itself in the 2 parking garages there. And we're actually already ready to roll in the Meriwether 1 and 2 garages. So if you are in that area, you work there, you live there, you can actually have your car outfitted with the technology, and you can do this today in those garages. So if you're there, talk to us and we can get you outfitted to do this. But they were a huge champion for us, and helped us get on the map. Then we expanded from 1 vehicle to multi-vehicle control, and we were able to build a fleet model. And we were able to control with a command console. You can control now multiple vehicles. Thereby, this same operational efficiency can now be achieved by a fleet operator on multiple vehicles. And now your savings amplify. Now you can repurpose those staff members to actually do something more valuable with their time. So inspectors and transition operators, they can now focus their energies and efforts on things that they don't have to move these vehicles around or waste time parking. You can realize up to 50% efficiencies there. And with that, we had another champion actually come in for us. Dr. Ball announced an innovation grant last year, and we applied for that. And I think that there was synergy there, so we won this grant. We've actually completed the engineering now on retrofitting some of the county vehicles. We are paused for COVID. And so as soon as we come out of this COVID, we should have, the technology installed on some of the county vehicles, and we will have the county vehicles go out and about with our technology. So we're waiting to come out of this COVID, and we're ready for it, actually. So we use this COVID time to create, to engineer what we needed to do for retrofitting these vehicles. And we also used this time to do some more innovative marketing, digital marketing. So we were able to take our existing local wins and we were able to take that across the country. So we were able to recreate our BWI airport experience. And now we have an airport in California. We are also in conversation with the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. And then we have a couple of other fleets from the city of Madison and also the United States Postal Service. So that, this COVID time, all of these things happened during the COVID time. And so we were able to, so now we are actually completing the engineering on these. And as soon as we come out of COVID, all of these different points will be activated and operational. So these are some of the pictures of what we have in operation right now. And this is, where my most important slide is. So we are through the innovation pipeline. We have gone to market, and now we are at the portion where we have to maintain our lead. So today, what I wanted to leave behind and talk to the community about is we are at a point where we want to scale and we want to compete nationally. And so we are looking for local partners. So, if you have sites here where we can deploy, we would love to talk to you and show you a case study of how it would help you. But also we are looking for partners to help us scale. So if you are a small business, especially small businesses in manufacturing, you do software development, any kind of embedded hardware experience and development, of course, cybersecurity and marketing and sales, and we want to team up. And because we are going nationwide and we have a lot of opportunities that as a small business ourselves is very hard for us to execute and operate. So we have these wins and now we want to work together with others to scale that. So please, I'm looking for partners and collaborators here, especially marketing and sales, because we're also in putting together a Kickstarter campaign to take the kits direct to consumers in the market. And so we're looking for some marketing and help there. And of course, where I come from, I said it right at the beginning, where I come from, it is not possible to do this without, a local community help and mentorship. And I'm especially thankful for everything that I have received. So Steer continues to hold those values and we continue to do outreach. We support women in tech. We have support groups and we actually bring them in, train them. We also have a workforce development training program, interns. We hire a lot of interns. We hire a lot of people who are in the county workforce redevelopment programs. So chronically unemployed or people who require retraining to get a job. We've hired a lot of those into our operations, our field operations, testing, and our automotive technician roles. And we continue to work with Howard County middle schools and high schools and schools across the country to further STEM so that these children are really on the track of understanding what innovation is and what the future of the world looks like with AI, with robotics, and how can they be ready to not only face the world, but how can they be ready to even operate in this world and work in this world? So we do a little bit of that. So if you have engagements on those efforts, we would love to partner with you on those as well. So with that, I would like to just, turn the floor over back to Leonardo, or if anybody has any questions for me, I'm happy to take them. This is some of our honorable mentions. I'll leave it there.
Leonardo, if it's okay, this is Phil Florenzo. I had a few questions for Anuja.
Absolutely.
So Anuja, that's very impressive. Can you describe, the practical application at the airports?
Yes. So the BWI what started at the BWI airport is they have a concept of concierge. So the BWI experience would be you drive up and pull up at the curb, and you can do curbside checking for your bags. Your car goes and parks itself, and you and your wallet can walk into the airport. And now you have all the free time to, enjoy your time at the airport itself before you even have to take a flight.
Okay.
So it's about consumer convenience. And so Steer is operating in the hourly garage that's right across the airport.
Right.
So on the 5th and 6th floor, and you can pull up there, your car will go park, and then you walk across the bridge to the airport.
So how does the device get in your car? Does it already have to be there, or does the concierge put one in your car?
No, you have to be retrofitted with the Steer kit before.
Okay.
So you have to have the steer enabled, you have to have a steer enabled vehicle. So we have to put that on your car. But once you put that on there, you can use it at the airport, you can use it at Meriwether, you can use it in 33 places between BWI Airport and Howard County. We have 33 places where this technology can be used. You name it, the Dorsey Mark train station, Odenton train station. You can use it at the Columbia Mall. You can use it at the Meadow Ridge Sports Complex. You can use it at the schools, CVS's, Walmart's, Targets. There are 33 places right here in this county that you can use it at.
Does the parking facility have technology? Is it outfitted with technology as well?
The infrastructure does not need technology to be outfitted on it, unless it's a closed garage. So if it's an open surface lot, it does not need any technology to be retrofitted or any hardware, anything on there. If you have a closed garage and you have signal attenuation, then you need repeaters. You need to have, but other than that, you don't need anything.
So when you say there's 23 places that you can use it, if I buy one of these units, can I use it anywhere?
33. So you can use the level 4, the valet mode, in 33 places. When you open your Steer app, it will show you the network, the Steer network, and it will show you these are the places. So if you go to any of these places, you can let your car go park, and it will know where it needs to drive and get into the parking lot, and then find a parking spot and park, like your Costco, for example.
So you geofence the application?
Oh, we geofence the application, yes.
Okay.
Then we have the other features like I talked about a pull-in, pull-out feature. You don't need to be on the Steer network for that. So now if you go anywhere, including your office site and something that's not on the Steer network, you can actually, you have to hold the button down. In that case, you can't walk away from your car. You have to stand there and hold the button down, and your car will actually move and find a spot and park for you. But you have to be around it because it's not mapped and not on the Steer network.
And how much does this cost for the consumer?
It costs about $1,200. That's our starting offering price. In the future, the price will kind of change a little bit, but the goal currently is to seed the market and saturate it. So that's $1,200 is what it costs currently.
Okay. Well, thank you. It's very impressive.
Thank you.
And Anuj, I just have one question before we wrap up and proceed. For those that are listening, just perhaps share just quickly, how did you take this concept, I guess, from what you thought would work, and just, I guess, share a little bit about just the story of taking, hey, I think cars can drive or park themselves, and, and yet taking what was an idea and a concept ultimately to being able to get it implemented, get it funded, and so forth. Because I'm sure there are those that are listening or that will watch this later online that maybe have ideas in their head and are trying to figure out, how do I take this idea and implement it, get someone else to buy into my vision, to actually even want to perhaps invest in my business, in my company, in this platform. So if you would just share a little bit about kind of your story on that end.
Thank you. Sure, I will. So the idea started because I have been in the cybersecurity business for 2 decades, and 10 of which the last decade has been in automotive cybersecurity. And as I was working, I noticed that a lot of these vehicles are over-engineered with extra, the sensors can do more, but they are not doing what they can. There are more computation capabilities, and cars are becoming more and more electronically advanced. And so I was also watching this wave of autonomous vehicles coming by, and some of that, my background is in a distributed control system. So I was watching this come by, and I noticed everybody was packing on more sensors, more hardware, more power, more everything onto these vehicles and making them bulky just to be able to make them go autonomous. And I said, there has to be a middle ground, because what they are building is not cost conscious. It's almost $100,000 worth of equipment, and nobody's going to buy a car with $100,000 worth of options for $30,000 car. And so I relooked at the engineering, and I said, with what is existing on these vehicles, we need to add just a little bit more. And these vehicles should be able to go autonomous on themselves. So that was the hypothesis where we started in 2016. And we had some, because of the background and industry experience, we had one of the tier ones and one of the car manufacturers actually came in and worked with us. And so we were able to very quickly build that proof of concept. That's what we did when we were at the MCE. at the Innovation Center is we built that very early proof of concept, and these cars were able to go autonomous just out of stock vehicles. And that's where we knew that, yes, in theory, this technology works. Now we had to solve it on the axis of cost, complexity, and safety. So we're able to achieve this complexity and this performance. Now we have to make sure that its cost is aligned with what the market can afford, and safety, we can reach, a particular level that is okay for consumers to be able to use. So then we kind of moved into a garage space so that we could build it out, and we could actually run lots of tests day and night and 24/7, 365 days a year, whether it's rain or snow or sleet or whatever. In every weather we can run tests on it. And there we expanded and made it more rigid and more robust while controlling the cost. So our early hardware prototypes were very cost conscious. They still are cost conscious, but they are now more aligned with manufacturing and easier to install and things like. So that's where we started. And as far as funding goes, we were able to tap into some very non-traditional, for entrepreneurs, they are non-traditional funding sources. So one, this was my third startup. So I had existing investors who had in the past invested in my other companies, and that credibility and that history helped. So I had some of my early investors reinvest in this company along side by side with myself. But then we also had the Howard County grants come in. We also had, there is this VLT program that the state of Maryland runs, which is a very, very important program that's not very well known. At least I didn't know about it until, the Maryland Innovation Center pointed me in that direction. They said, you should look at these programs. And so we qualified. And again, we worked with MMG. I think they were on the call last week. So we are an example case. We went with them, and it was a very easy process. And we were able to get capital, the right amount of capital at the right place and time. We needed it. So we were able to use that for our manufacturing, making the process better and so forth. And of course, we had traction with paying customers. And so they came in and they gave us funds to be able. So Ford, for example, wanted a sample A delivery. And so we delivered to them, and they then tested our product out, but they paid for it. So we've strived very hard to try to get paid engagements, and we're a lean, small company, and that's how we wanted to be, and try to keep our burn rate small. That actually helped us during COVID. We had 0 layoffs, and we actually were able to transition the entire team to remote. It was very painful in the beginning because some of our people are field operations, and so you cannot sit at your desktop and run an autonomous vehicle from there. It just doesn't work like that. But we were able to transition them to other activities that were also aligned with the company goals. And then when Governor Hogan started opening up the state, they were the first people to go back into the office. So we had a transition plan, and we got people to go into the office 1 day a week, one person 1 day, and maintain isolation, and then earn each other's confidence. And the steer team started the operations back again. So that's our story and our COVID story in a nutshell.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Anuja, for sharing with us. And again, I think as everyone can see, you can read these various articles on Steer to find out more about Steer technology. And all of this is taking place here in Howard County. And so with that, we are going to get ready to move on to our next discussion. And really, I think Anuja has really kicked us off well as we kind of talk about innovation and as we talk about pivoting. And certainly that's been one of these new buzzwords that has come about over, I think, the seemingly the last few months as everyone is talking about pivoting. And so obviously sometimes the question that comes up was, well, exactly what is that? And what does that mean? And how do you do it? And so forth. And so with that, we're going to move into a couple of conversations with some folks that can certainly tell us a lot about that and how. And so our first conversation is going to be with Mohammed Hadasuhat, and he is the new CEO of Unleash Technologies. And he's going to ultimately have a conversation with Chuck Buback, who is the head of the Maryland Innovation Center. And so I'm going to share a little bit about these two people and their backgrounds, and that I think both of them have great stories. And so just quickly, Chuck has over 40 years, almost 40 years in the technology industry, including a decade at Apple. And ultimately, he's been a serial entrepreneur with several successful startups and spinoffs, and has always remained on the cusp of tech advantage. In fact, he even helped launch Apple's first Macintosh back in 1980 something. And now he focuses on continuing to make technology work for business, as well as grandparenting and regularly being entertained by Jason. And then Mohammed, his background, as I was reading a little bit on it, is just tremendous. But just a little bit, he is a self-starter with a passion for client-centric technology. After college, he started out his career on Capitol Hill, working with trade associations and nonprofit organizations and meeting with their members to understand their needs, always focused on constituent and client objectives. Most recently, he serves as a management consultant, setting clients up for the future by developing and implementing planning tools, creative innovation processes, by leveraging technology, and leading teams through transformation programs. A highly rated consultant in the US, he was subsequently deployed to Southeast Asia to build out a regional consulting practice. As part of the management team there, he helped to grow the ERP technology practice supporting enterprise clients. He developed strategy along with technology solutions to clients ranging from targeted modules to deliver specific functionalities to larger scale transformation in IT systems. And here's just a little fun note, at least I thought it was fun. While in Asia, HGTV's House Hunters International Families temporarily moved there in 2013. And with an enthusiasm for risk-taking and working through difficult, high-profile environments here and abroad, he is keen to tailor and deliver data-rich web solutions and web applications for clients. So with that, I'm going to now turn things over to Chuck and Mohammed.
Great. Thanks, Leonardo. I have to say that following Anuja is a difficult feat, but in a way it's perfect because I think Anuja sort of demonstrates an important factor that everybody certainly on this Zoom would know, is that we are really here in a great area, what we've got right now. Even with COVID, we are in just a fantastic area when you look at examples like Anuja, where companies can start up. Many of us feel that this is really the untapped region for innovation. And we've got some great examples, and nobody needs to be reminded of the fact that that comes from having really a diverse, well-educated workforce, our location. We have everything going for us. And so, part of the challenge at the Maryland Innovation Center is to take that to the next level and turn this really, truly into the center of the universe for innovation. So I'm excited to be chatting with Mohammed. Leonardo gave a good sort of introduction to him. And we want to talk about pivoting. I think everybody's probably tired of hearing three words, probably. That's Zoom, mask, and pivot, unfortunately. But the truth is, this pandemic has created really the opportunity for companies to reevaluate the position they're in, not because they wanted to, because they're forced to. And what certainly we have seen is that it's kind of taken two modes here. Many businesses found themselves just totally stopped dead in their tracks when this happened and not sure which way to go. And a lot of companies initially, I think, kind of went into sort of like a hold mode and then tried to figure out where, when this thing is over, where they will move to. And the truth is, we're finding out now is there truly is probably no over. What we've moved into is to a new world that we've got to adapt to, and pivoting is the way that a lot of businesses are trying to find an example way to do that. And so Mohammed and I are going to maybe have a little chat here, and certainly want to start off a little bit with maybe Mohammed talking about his role as he came in to Unleash Technology and sort of some ideas there. And then we're going to cover three sort of areas that we've identified: operational, finance, ops, and certainly markets. And we'll try to dive through those over the next 25 or 30 minutes. So Mohammed, did you want to kind of pick up a little bit? And we'll just, this is, by the way, this is no PowerPoint. This is a conversation. And certainly I suspect we'll keep an eye on the questions that come up in the thing. We want to try to keep this sort of a freewheeling thing. So Mohammed, I'm going to kind of turn over to you if you want to quickly talk about, sort of Unleashed and how you've sort of taken this pivot thing in a direction.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. I just wanted to actually just share with Leonardo. Is there any chance you could activate, Leonardo, my video screen? I think I'm unable to activate it on my end. And if you could activate
yeah,
the
mine.
video.
I don't. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'm seeing two Muhammad. Okay, because I'm seeing another Muhammad. I thought that was you. So let's see here. Okay.
Oh, here we go. Yep, there we go. Perfect.
There.
Okay.
Got it. Yeah, I think there are two Muhammads, in fact.
Yeah, I'm like now one of them's a cat.
Right. Thank you, Chuck, and thank you, Leonardo, for that introduction as well. Yeah, so my story with Unleashed is relatively new. I came on board as part of a transaction back in November, almost a year ago, with Link Partners, and our investment group acquired Unleashed Technologies. At that time, we closed at that time, and ever since about January of this year, I've been running the business as the CEO of the company. On the subject of pivots, this year has all been about pivots, right? Given all the challenges that we've encountered from COVID-19 to the economic issues, of course, that we're facing as a country. So it's been challenging for sure. I think, the first pivot I would say that we encountered was operational in nature. And I think to some extent, we kind of lucked out in that we are a virtual business. Unleashed Technologies builds websites primarily for trade associations in the DMV area, along increasingly with companies, particularly manufacturing and financial services companies. And so because we build websites and maintain them for these clients, we are a virtual business. And so we did already actually have what we call a remote only working environment, even before COVID-19 hit, where our team operated 3 days a week on site and 2 days off site. So when we had to go fully virtual, it wasn't that significant of a departure operationally to be able to do that. I think from an operational standpoint, it was relatively seamless. We already had actually a significant number of our staff working remotely across the country, not just based here in the Maryland area. But, I would say that was the biggest hurdle from a pivot standpoint. And I think I probably share that with the experiences of other businesses. I think, on this call, other business owners, business operators, that was the most immediate concern. Obviously, that related to safety as well, and ensuring that, we had a safe approach and environment. But I think thus far, from a pivot standpoint, and we can talk about it further, Chuck, of course, the operational piece was the first one that we addressed head on. And I think so far, at least we've been able to operate that with a tremendous amount of resilience.
Mohammed, when you and I were chatting, we talked about sort of this remote only discussion, which is you've got several camps now that are sort of forming, and you've got a certain camp that feels that this move to remote work has been a good thing, and it depends upon probably the sector you're talking about. And then there are the feeling, and most people feeling, that there's got to be a move back into where groups can work together, or certainly some sort of hybrid model. And I know you and I have chatted about the fact that your feeling is that certainly in your business, in the type of business you run, that hybrid or that model where people do have the opportunity to work together is critical. Any comments on sort of that?
Yeah, I mean, I had come into this, just sort of reflecting on past year, especially when COVID hit in February, March. I had thought that, the full remote option was the best option, right? And that was the wave of the future. But, after a number of months, 6 to 9 months of this, I do appreciate the value of the sort of face-to-face physical interaction, even for a virtual business like ours, even with all the virtual tools that we have at our disposal, right? Zoom, Teams, and all of that. There's something about, particularly for a creative agency like ours, the chemistry, the sort of interaction that generates even more value. 1 + 1 in that situation could equal 3. That sort of value add element. I think that's why I think after a searing experience like this year, the hybrid model I think is for me at least stands out as sort of the most realistic option. Where people come into work at a certain period of time for a certain amount of days, perhaps not all every day of the week, but certainly spend some time, and then generate that people-to-people, that physical interaction. I think is really critical. By the same token, it's also a lesson in resilience, because if you have a hybrid model, rather than being so reliant on remote only or on the physical model,
right.
that embeds a certain degree, a profound degree of resilience in your business structure, in your business model.
That's a great point. No, that's a great point. And I think the planning part, again, we talk about pivoting is not having that take you over, but be prepared for it. I think, one of the challenges of pivoting is being aware of what may happen and making those moves yourself instead of being driven there. And I think this concept of understanding why the value of remote and the value of being in the office and then building a plan around that. I know that some people have even taken that further. I know I was talking to Anuja, I think earlier, and she mentioned that when they started working from home, one of the things they wanted people to do was to dress for work when they were working from home, to keep everybody in the mode, because I think there have been certainly studies and all that shown that although initially it looked like the work from home had a very high productivity rate, certainly from the CFOs of the organizations who saw their potential, cost of housing employees go down, that is shifting. So when we talk about pivoting, then maybe that's one thing for everybody to kind of take a look at is you want to kind of reevaluate, how you're handling that. And that brings in a whole slew of other things, like the way you may need to change your employee handbook, the way you kind of do things when you've got employees now that are offsite. And that doesn't even get into the security concerns and all. We won't touch those here, but maybe the first sort of, thing to kind of note here is that things like remote and all are part of making yourself more offensive on pivoting and building. And I think, Mohammed, you said it perfectly, building resilience, knowing that if you've got your foot in both worlds, you can kind of adapt better.
Yeah, I think that on that point, it's interesting. I think that CFOs for sure at the beginning of this whole thing felt like, okay, the bottom line is helped, right? Because, they don't have the sort of physical cost of real estate. On the other hand, I think, the productivity question has been perhaps in the near term, there was no hit to productivity, but I think over long term, one could reasonably argue that productivity, may have declined actually, just because, the fragmentation really does actually have, in my view, at least, harmful impact on, business,
Sure.
Like it's that sort of lack of connectivity. And it's so hard to kind of resuscitate or build that on the virtual channel.
Exactly. One of the things when we've been talking about pivoting at the Innovation Center is we are under this sort of model, which we're talking about is sort of act like a startup. In other words, for companies this is a great time potentially, and I say great because I use that word very carefully. It's not great. It's not a great time, but it is certainly a good time to stop and reevaluate things. And that's why if you had a business that was 10 or 15 years old and you stop and reevaluate it at this point, that's where you ask yourself those kinds of questions. In other words, maybe the office space is a great example of that. What was it productive before for us? Was it set up right? And now's the time to kind of plan that out as part of thinking, what we've been calling kind of think like a startup now, even if you've been in business for 2 decades, because the world has basically turned you into a startup again. And so I think this remote topic is one that will continue on, and I suspect everybody's been through many Zoom sessions on it with ideas of how to do it, but it is definitely an evolving state.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. Thinking like a startup is an interesting kind of approach, right? Because even for established businesses, this is an opportunity to reset with your stakeholders too, with your bank, that funds you, with your investors. I mean, I think this is one of those moments where, there aren't that many moments in the life of a business where you can reset. You're almost like, not only in many cases, of course, a business is forced to reset because they have no other option. But, for I think a lot of businesses also, it's an opportunity to reset. It's not, that doesn't necessarily have to be forced upon, depending on your circumstance, but it's a useful opportunity to have those conversations that you wouldn't otherwise have, right, with your bank or with your investors.
Yep.
And I think that's where I think I would say, don't miss those opportunities. I think this is a huge opportunity rather to take advantage of that.
And you just transitioned perfectly to the second area, which you and I talked about, was sort of finance and operations. And this was this thing, as you just mentioned, is a great time to refocus and evaluate sort of your customer base. For instance, we talked about evaluating your employee base with the remote only, and now maybe a focus on your customer base and really taking a look at how business operated before, and now with COVID, it changes things. So many businesses, and you and I had this conversation, sort of this refocus on your customer and figuring out which customers are profitable, which customers may not be. And this is a good time to re-look at that. And that is a hard thing to do. Nobody wants to do that. And, I certainly use the examples where a company that probably has, a company that has a product, if you look at a product mix, usually if you had 10 products, two are really driving the revenue of the other 8, but you carry them anyway, and you put effort into them. And this is the kind of time when, pivoting can get you to take a look at your product mix and say, knowing what I know the world looks like now, is this the time to really put my focus in on a certain customer base, for instance, or a certain product area?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, not all revenue is good revenue, and that's just a basic business 101. And you have to prioritize at the end of the day. I think, when we look at resilience, we're also talking about the resilience of the relationship that we have with our customers, right? And so the question there is, what are those customers that you can see, not just from the perspective of this one fiscal year, but what does that relationship mean over a 5-year life cycle? And I think that's the value, I think, of this moment where we can sort of start assessing, real customer lifetime value, right?
Exactly.
That's the key metric there.
Yeah.
And whether that means, thinking about recurring revenue, right? Like prioritizing those customers that have a repeatable pattern of revenue generation, recurring, maybe some sort of, a multi-month contract or even multi-year contract, something along those lines, I think, because I think, this whole crisis, I think, has just revealed how fragile we can be as businesses if we don't think about our customers in a sort of a more partnership context, right?
Absolutely.
We can survive together.
Yep. And to pick up sort of where you were there, and you and I had this conversation too, and it's a controversial thing, but when I talked about sort of firing customers in an interesting way, and that's part of that, but that is part of that being a business owner or a strategist to say, I've got a certain number of my customers that could be draining me. And you and I have both shared examples. I shared that when I owned a cloud managed services company, we had a lot of customers. And what we found when we really looked at the data, and that gets to the second point, is understanding deep within there, what we found was the customers that looked like they had a lot of revenue could be, a lot of reoccurring revenue when you really looked at the cost of doing business with them. And that cost could be the support of them, and also getting them to follow sort of the plan. In our case, this was obviously we were in a technology support role, which meant we wanted our customers to follow certain rules. If they don't follow them, that comes back on the vendor. And so, sometimes those are tough decisions that sometimes maybe are easier during a crisis. In other words, look at your customer base. And if you have customers that potentially are not following the strategic plan of where you want to go, it's a time to either have a conversation with them or certainly, and we joke, but sort of fire the customer is a tough thing to say. But the truth is, there are times when those customers can be a problem. And to finish up this finance side, and you and I talked about this, it's about profit really in the end, as opposed to revenue. And this is not new news. Everybody hears this on every business call, but there was ever a time that that's the case. It may be now. Although, and I think you and I had the conversation, it's not saying you don't want to go get a lot of revenue. So
yeah. I would add to that, and I'm going through an experience now with actually quite candidly with a customer where the cost associated with bearing that customer is clearly borne not in just in terms of dollars, but in terms of the stress on our team members. Mm-hmm. Like I think during a period like this where you not only have economic challenge, more broadly, but also literally health and safety, mental health in particular, I think you have to really take into account the care and well-being of your employees, obviously. And that means that if a customer is being unreasonable, and that translates obviously to cost, right? But also in terms of the health and well-being of our employees, I think to me, there's no question that's the case where you just have to prioritize your employees first and foremost.
Absolutely. Good point. And again, to just to highlight the point more, this is that rare opportunity to do that with the sort of excuse, to yourself and to the customer and all that. These are different times. They require a different vision. And, I know for sure it's very difficult for an existing business to change. But we have to state that right up front. If you have an existing business and things have been going okay or even good, making change is very, very difficult to do. This should give you, and that's where this whole pivot thing, it's just the most opportune time to stop and take a look at where things are going, where you think they're going to go. And I think the key word, and you've mentioned it several times, and Dr. Ball did right in his thing, is resiliency. You got to build that in there, because this is not a one-time event. We need to look at it that way, is we're not out of this one. And the odds when we do come sort of out of this one, it may not be an exit door, right? It may just be a hallway into a new thing that was the result of this. And it's going to change things. Last thing, a comment I'll make on that, and you mentioned, is sort of this idea of going after reoccurring revenue and all. And I think there potentially is an opportunity particularly for services companies, to approach that model, in the sense that I think that, companies now are skittish for long-term commitments and may not buy off big pieces of things. And this is a great opportunity for companies maybe to reevaluate how they sell to their customer. And maybe if they sell them in either a small monthly fee or something that's approachable, and maybe, unfortunately, it requires a commitment. And we're going to touch on that in the next segment, is sort of this, how do you create a partnership then, potentially, not only with other companies, but with your customers. The third piece we talked about was sort of markets. And Mohammed, I know you and I had a long conversation a little bit about sort of, as an example, was sort of like a move to other markets. And one great example was potentially a move to the federal space to take advantage of that. Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So our company, interestingly enough, even though we're located in the heart of Maryland, just in between Baltimore and DC, we actually don't have any federal business. Our business is primarily focused on, nonprofits, trade associations, which, of course, as I said, are massed in this area, which has some similarity with the federal sector, and of course the commercial space. And so for us, thinking about the next decade as we enter into the 2020s, thinking about and reflecting, by the way, upon the experience that we had this year, thinking about revenue diversification, right, as a way to de-risk a lot of customer concentration. So, we're constantly thinking about, whether we should go into the federal sector. And so there are different ways to think about that, as I'm sure many of our attendees on this call, on this event are very familiar with. You can go down the federal contractor route, right? The prime contractor route, which has its risks and rewards, of course, big investment, obviously, especially with federal capture. And then by the same token, you can sort of de-risk that by being a federal subcontractor, which we have been before, and taking advantage of that. I think because of our place in the virtual economy, because we are building websites and maintaining them, I suspect that, and a big push potentially in federal spending in the next decade, I suspect that the federal investment in virtual will actually accelerate, just because of the broader changes happening in the economy. And so, we do sense that as an opportunity, but we're also being very gingerly about how to approach the federal sector, because it is a big commitment. If you go all in as a prime, that's a very big commitment, and a big investment. And maybe one way to de-risk that is to come in as a subcontractor and stage one's progression into the federal sector that way. But for us, It's really more of a revenue diversification strategy, de-risking our customer concentration, and really taking advantage of a secular change, I think, in the economy.
Yep, and those are tough things, and you and I talked about it. It's a very difficult move sometimes to make that, to straddle both markets, federal and commercial. As some, I'm sure, people, as you mentioned, that are online or who in the federal space realize it's a commitment to go after that, which has its own costs associated with marketing, et cetera. And the other part I was going to mention there is sort of also the pivoting when we talk about markets from, we'll say, a services company to a product company, or a product company to a service company, usually the other way around. And this is a time when I think that's probably happened a lot with companies who have pivoted to maybe, PPE products, et cetera, who have looked at moving to more of a product thing. That itself also has challenges, and very, that is one of the most treacherous things. And I know in conversations I've been on, and being part of the Maryland Tech Council's Venture Mentor Services program, where we do have companies come in, and that a few have wanted to move from a services to a product company, and that leap is got a big cliff to it, and there's a big gap there, and those are the kind of times. But these are times to potentially reevaluate that, but be aware of the risks, because it's very difficult. I found that the best solutions companies are ones that understand what the problem is. So the best people to sometimes build a product is somebody who was also previously involved in the support of that, because you're right at the customer's level to understand. And I know in two of my previous spin-offs, that's exactly what we did. We went to school on the services side and then learned the problems. That's how you build you build a solution. You're able to almost test it on the fly, but that can be a challenge too, as you sort of pivot your markets.
Yeah, I think a couple of points here. I think in at least from the standpoint of technology, right? There is this interesting, oftentimes evolution for some companies that are engaged in services to move to, let's say, SaaS services, software as a service, essentially, which is more of a product-based kind of approach. And that can be a difficult transition for that kind of type of business, or for any business that's thinking about making such a change, because it's a business model change. It's a significant fundamental shift in your business model. But, to be fair to the times we live in, if you're to do a business model change, now would be the time to do it, right? And especially if you have a really good insight into your customer mix, your sort of potential addressable market, and understanding your product and how that product meets that particular market segment. But now would be the time to make those changes. Absolutely. There are a few moments, I think, in time, in a circumstance where you can make those shifts. But now I think all stakeholders, your bank, your investors, your customers, get it if you make that change, right. Because the times may demand it.
Absolutely. Well, this may be a perfect time then to transition sort of into this next section, which we are calling partnerships and joint ventures. And I think we're going to bring Phil Florenzo in. If he's perfect. There he is. I guess we didn't do Leonardo didn't have a chance to do a bio on Phil, but Phil is a attorney in the area here with a ton of experience, particularly related to partnerships, joint ventures, as well as other business areas. I personally have been involved with Phil on a couple of transactions over the years, and Phil's also worked, I believe, was involved in a lot of the earlier things, if I'm not mistaken, Phil, with SourceFire back in the day, where that was quite a large. Phil, do you want to take us maybe just give everybody a 2-minute thing on yourself?
Sure. So, good morning, everyone. We've already talked, but good morning anyway. So I have been practicing law for about 20 years, spent maybe 10 years in-house, started off at Westinghouse over in Linthicum, which was then acquired by Northrop Grumman, and then worked for another company out in Germantown called, at the time, TTC, which evolved into Acterna, and then JDS Uniphase, and now I think it even has another name. But I've been doing my own thing for about 15 years now, and mostly technology companies. I have an electrical engineering background, so it lends itself to the technology space. Some government contractors, some real-time location systems, some data analytics companies, just a broad spectrum of different technology type companies, software as a service and software, and everything that comes along with that. So I think, Chuck, you want me to just sort of jump into the JV?
Well, let me go ahead and frame this. Yeah, let me frame this a little bit, and then we can kind of transition sort of into that. And I've got Mohammed is staying with us and all, and we wanted to kind of pivot to this conversation because and Mohammed and I touched upon it. This is a great time to reevaluate a lot of things, and some of those things are the partnerships that you have and the potential partnerships, and we'll move even to JV or joint ventures, which we'll hand over at one point to Phil, can talk about it from the sort of nuts and bolts side. But I want to kind of carry the conversation, and certainly with both of us, sort of is this this need to do that, particularly in the business environment. And I'll set sort of a thesis here is that businesses traditionally, particularly small businesses, aren't real big on sharing, between themselves. I mean, businesses tend to be siloed. Maybe they share within their associations. If you're an accountant, you're a member of the, accounting association. But if there was ever a time for businesses to really reevaluate the way that they, perform business, and Mohammed and I certainly had some of those conversations about the fact that it's a good time to evaluate your relationships, both with your customers, your vendors, and potentially your competitors. There are some great opportunities out there for companies who, the greatest example is, you have a company that's got a great product but you have a lousy sales force, and you realize that during this pivot, and then you have a competitor, another company who has a great sales force, but their product mix isn't there. Potentially that's an opportunity to open up and have conversations with that, because these are the times to do that. That is not a built-in thing that small businesses have. Most of the time it is about protecting your turf, your customer base, and kind of, I kind of use the thing that everybody's in their sort of walled off silos, kind of trying to build their silo, taller, when these are times when that could actually be a detriment. And so, this sort of examination of the people that you work with maybe creates a new opportunity to create a partnership. And a partnership does not have to be, a Fortune 500, partnership. It can be a partnership that started. Mohammed, I'm just kind of pass over to you for a moment to think. And you and I had some kind of conversations and thoughts about sort of how you examine those relationships. And I don't know if you had some examples.
Yeah, the way I think about it is that there's your existing partners, and I actually put the category of investors, your bank, those types. This is an opportunity perhaps to sort of reorient those relationships a bit. It might mean more capital infusion if you need it, or it might mean something entirely different, more of a leaning on your investors, let's say on mentorship and advice during these very difficult times. Maybe if you have your board of directors, really leaning into those sort of existing partners and reconfiguring those partnerships. The other thing is, of course, developing new partnerships, and the opportunity set, I think, might be new partnerships with your customers and your vendors. Oftentimes in good times, vendors are sort of more transactional in nature, it seems like, but in these more difficult, challenging times, this is where the vendors deliver for you, right? And that's where, you might want to think about partnering with them more vertically or horizontally or however you want, right? In terms of, from an integration standpoint. The other category is, of course, is customers, partnering with customers, like as an example, we're developing a website for a manufacturer. As it turns out, we've discovered that in the space that this manufacturer operates in, there's these lots of businesses, sub $1 billion revenue businesses, that we want to then, use this success of building this website as a comp, as a case study, essentially. And so that's the kind of thing where I think that might be helpful from a partnership standpoint, is being a thought leader, enabling you to be a thought leader in your industry, essentially, and having that partnership leverage. So it's not necessarily an immediate monetary benefit, but certainly something that could lead to long-term value because you're seen as a thought leader. Courtesy.
That's a really good point. You brought up a good point, and that is moving from a transactional model to more of a partnering model, and that requires a different mindset to actually treat a customer as as everybody talks about their partnership with their customers. But for a lot of businesses, it's a transactional event. It's I'll provide this service based on this contract. You pay me net 30, as opposed to trying to figure out this is a great time to relook at what are the challenges your customer faces, right? And maybe out of COVID, and how can your product, your service, your thing maybe work that way? And sometimes partnering with customers can be the best thing. Example for me was very early on when we were building a financial product, and we ended up partnering with the financial firm in creating the solution. So we went to them and said, "Hey, we'll build this if you fund it, and you'll get to have it." It turned out that worked out well for them, worked out for us, but that was because we didn't go in there and try to sell them something. We said, let's work together on this and jointly sort of create this thing, which means we both have a little bit of skin in the game, so to speak. But in that case, that moves to sort of, well, I'll bring Phil in, because in that particular one that I was mentioning, I luckily had in there that I kept the IP. So the other twist to that is in those partnerships, it's those finer details that potentially matter. And in that case, which goes back to the late 90s, it made the difference of a product whose value was much, much different, because when it did take off, the company was able to retain that IP, and that was one of the trade-offs for it to build the product for them. So those are the kind of creative things that probably are ones that are worth doing. Phil, I'm going to bring you in a little bit, and maybe if you want to pick up kind of where we're at, and that's this sort of conversation of how do you, maybe more along the lines of some example of some structural ways that could work or whatever. Considering the fact that online here probably are not a lot of, we don't have a lot of Fortune 500 companies on the Zoom right now, but sort of this thing about companies wanting to relook at how they kind of create these partnerships.
Right. Right. Well, so, for this audience, I think I'll try to stick to some things that I think are going to be practical for them. And so, Anuja, for example, had talked about Steer and how her company has this really, really established technology. It's proven technology, and it is implemented some places. But if I heard her right, she sort of has a challenge right now of sort of selling it, not just to the user, but also to the airports and to the other facilities that she might want them to implement it. And, in that context, while Steer is good at the technology and good at rolling it out, perhaps they don't have all of the relationships with the airports that they would really like to have. So if they could find an organization that sells into the airports all day, every day, then they could enter into a relationship with them where they say, hey, we've got this great technology, this great solution. You have this really good sales channel into the airports. Why don't we enter into this strategic relationship? You go and push our technology into the airport. There'll be a revenue share, or there'll be some benefit to both of us, right? And that way, Anuja's organization doesn't have to go out and hire salespeople. They can actually just partner with somebody who already has those salespeople in place.
Great point.
It
Excellent point.
A situation where both parties are motivated to do it, excited to do it, and they both win. And then I think so. That's what we would talk about. Sort of a traditional. You can call it a sales referral relationship. You can call it a sales rep relationship. But there's a lot of different flavors to that where you don't have your small company, have technology, don't have a sales force. You can partner with somebody who does. And I think in the same context, with airports, I think separately, if they were looking at, for example, federal facilities, and they don't have a sales channel or marketing channel into these big federal facilities that have these really big parking lots every day, the NSA comes to mind, where you have to walk, a mile or half a mile from your car to the facility. But so if you develop relationships with organizations that have those contacts at those federal facilities, then you enter into a strategic partnership, and they can push your technology into those. So that's just one example. I think in terms of Unleashed, and Mohammed, you had touched on getting into government space. You have a commercial solution right now, and two things come to mind. One is you could find a partner who had a GSA schedule, and you could piggyback on top of their GSA schedule and put your services on the GSA schedule, so that when a solicitation comes out, then you've gotten through all the red tape. You're approved. Your pricing has been approved, and a government contractor that has a solicitation out there could look at your offering and say, hey, we want to use you, and it streamlines the process. I think in another context, if you wanted to get into the government space, I have a number of government contractor clients that provide those types of services. Sometimes it's staffing, sometimes it's web design, sometimes it's, I think Drupal comes to mind. But in any event, what happens is, rather than going out there and trying to, capture these opportunities on your own, you can partner with the existing government contractors who have a lot of contacts, and you can say, look, this is what we have to offer. This is the service that we have to offer. When you come upon a solicitation where you don't have this capability, you have a different capability, then maybe we could team together, and you would enter into what is called a teaming agreement. And the teaming agreement basically says, we are going to work together to prepare a proposal in response to the solicitation, and we're going to do this exclusively between each other. If we win, then company A is going to be the prime. Unleashed, for example, would be the sub. And you would agree ahead of time to split up the work, 60-40, 70-30. And as you sort of grow into those relationships, and you would develop sort of these contacts with these government entities, and decide at some point or another whether you wanted to try to make the leap into being a prime. But that's the way that I've seen it evolve around here. And I think it might be relevant to the audience because we are in a space where there are so many government dollars that are going around that
Yep.
There's a lot of companies out there, obviously, who feed off of that.
Yeah, to pick up on that too, Phil. I'm going to just jump in because the other thing that there is a lot of money right now too is in the federal money that's coming out because of the pandemic. Actually, there's a lot of CARES money. There's a lot of money that's come down, and that's created the opportunity to partner also because some of them have sort of catches on there that require that almost forced partnering. I mean, there were several that required, for instance, the company be a non-for-profit. Right. Well, that's an opportunity to partner with a non-profit and provide that solution because they have sort of the access to the dollars. And so that's why you have to kind of open up your eyes a little bit. And that, again, it still comes in the end, right, is understanding the pros and cons of a partnership. Where are the gotchas? Where are the pieces that need to be addressed?
That's right. And at the same time, you need to be careful. You need to make sure, as Chuck said, if you're going to do sort of a technology, if you're going to sort of share technology or jointly develop technology, you have to make sure that you define, who's going to own what, and you have to be careful about that. So I think just in general, Chuck, I just threw out a couple of examples. There are hundreds of different types of strategic partnerships. I think, the message that I would tell, this audience and the small business is don't think that you have to do it all yourself. You can partner with others to have a situation where each party can make money and you achieve your goals and they achieve their goals. And the type of partnership or relationship, strategic relationship is, basically only limited by, your creativity.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges I kind of come back to, and this is for the certainly for the audience to be aware of, is to find those partnerships. You have to find them in a sense. And again, when we're in a sort of a siloed environment, it's a lot harder to find some of those those partnerships to come out, particularly if you're not already in a space which does that. And you mentioned sort of the federal space, and this partnering is sort of built into the federal space. In other words, federal integrators are used to partnering. It's sort of the only way they go after contracts. So they'll partner with a sub to bring in, they need 200 people with Python experience. They got to go find that somewhere. So the partnering is sort of built in. When we move to the non-federal space, it's sort of a little foreign, I think, this sort of partnering idea. And I think that takes, again, using this pandemic as a time to reevaluate where there are huge benefits to doing it if it's done right. And Phil, you sort of touched on that. It's not to be taken lightly. Those are also the kind of things that later on, everybody's familiar, everybody's familiar with a small business knows that's where you end up in the battles, so to speak. In other words, those are the details that sound good, but you got to make sure you have them locked down. And we could probably spend 4 hours on examples of partnerships or things like that go wrong because there was not a mutual understanding of the goal and both parties weren't contributing. Particularly we get into smaller things. And the greatest example of that is just shareholders. In small business, where you end up a lot of times with battles between owners of the company. That same thing could be exaggerated when you've got now a partner that feels like they're part of it. So I think it requires a lot of thinking.
Well, and you have to be careful too. We talked about partnering with customers. I have one client who has some I'll call it a data analytics engine.
Right.
And there's a big company who wants to use it, and they want to use it on a sort of an exclusive basis, and the field of use is fairly broad. It's broader than they would have expected, and when you start to have these conversations, the small company gets excited about it, and then the big company comes in and basically says, "But we don't really want to pay very much for it." So you get into these situations where the big guys are trying to take advantage of the little guys.
Yeah.
And if you have a good technology, you have to be careful about that.
Good point. Mohammed, any examples or anything to pick up on that?
Yeah, no, I think we actually in our customer mix we have a fairly broad spectrum of client size, I would say. So we deal with a lot of big companies and small companies, small associations as well, and big associations. So I hear you. I think especially in a time like this, people think because you're small, right, that we can take advantage of you. And so I think a lot of owners get into that sort of original problem of if there's a final demand problem that they're having, right, from a revenue standpoint. Well, any revenue is good revenue. Well, you have to be careful with that, right? You have to make sure those terms, particularly as you're negotiating with a bigger customer, they're not squeezing you and squeezing you hard, because they potentially might think of themselves as having the bargaining power, right? So yeah, you have to be very sensitive for sure to that.
Yep. And it's got to be common. I think, and maybe there's a conversation piece too. It's got to be common goals, though, right? In other words, both parties have to be sort of chasing the same thing, which, by the way, is difficult sometimes if, let's be frank, some businesses aren't even sure their own strategy. In other words, if you're not sure, if you don't have your plan together, what's your strategy? If your strategy is to conquer, this by this, that's a plan. Then it's easier to find that partner to snap in. If it's more, I don't want to use life preserver, it's just grabbing at something. I think that's where maybe those common pieces aren't there. And the details do matter. And Phil probably knows this example, but I ran into that once when I did do a strategic partnership with a large financial firm for, a piece of software we had written, and they were going to license it to use it with their customers, which was great for us because then I don't have to do marketing. They were going to do some of the support. I basically provided the physical software for it. Unfortunately, in there, I agreed to an exclusive marketing or marketing of it, and kind of ownership of them selling it. Of course, it took off. I'm bound by that company only, and I've got customers who don't want to go through that company. And it became, one of those things where later on I learned that it's those finer details that matter. In that particular case, it even took off further because the company ended up actually filing for bankruptcy, which means that contract, that exclusivity sat then with the buyer of the bankrupt assets because it became an asset, which I wasn't allowed to break. So it's those details, and Phil's smiling because he knows some of these ones have been through. And that's where, again, these are all great concepts, but to put them into action still requires, you still got to be very, very careful to get those little pieces. And I would, that's a sort of I don't want to say a sales pitch, but it's sort of a sales pitch to make sure you get good advice on those things and to bring in an expert who can help you kind of like work those things through.
I would add also, I think we talked about this, Chuck, about this whole idea of temporary alliances as well, temporary partnerships versus strategic partnerships, right? Like it's something to think about as well as given the arguably temporary situation we find ourselves here in, maybe it's useful to think about your partners, partnering with folks, entities that in a temporary way, just to sort of get over the hump that is near term. And then setting that on one side, and then the other side thinking about partners on a long-term basis, right? Like if you have a vision for something that's longer term beyond what we're facing now, maybe you do want to get into those conversations to begin those strategic partnerships.
Yep. Phil, any pick up on that?
I think it's exactly right. I don't really have much to add to it. I mean, it's the strategic partnerships, like I said, take on a lot of different flavors. And, it just came to mind that I have a client who they provide data on products. They provide manufacturing data to distributors. And, they have a company that had sort of approached them, but they thought they were a competitor, and they talked through and they figured out, we're really not competitors. We might overlap a little bit. We could probably sort of join our data together and offer it to these customers at together, right? As sort of as a teaming type relationship. You have one situation where, one moment where they think that they're competitors and they can't, share anything with each other. And then there's another moment where they're working together and cooperating and winning business because, they're working together as opposed to, keeping each other at arm's length.
Yep. And that kind of goes to this message that I was trying to set is I think that is one of the, the keys potentially to pivoting and finding a lot of ways to sort of walk our way out of that. I'll give you another quick example, and that is sort of the plight right now that we're faced with restaurants, in the area where we've got, it's probably one of the most challenging segments right now, particularly as we move into winter, when a lot of restaurants have been able to sustain themselves, some through carry out business, and some there's not a carry out type business, and they've relied on outdoor seating and all. And so, one of the things that I found there, and I had brought this up in a meeting the other day, is in talking to one of the restaurateurs who was, exploring, lighting, UV lighting, exploring all these pieces to try to make things work, but he's doing it on his own, right? And then, 10 blocks away is another restaurant that's trying things out, and then another restaurant. And that's the example of sort of, trying to break these walls down. And I'm just giving you an example of where, that's where that sharing can create some commonness there. If somebody's already experimented and found that, this UV lighting system doesn't work, it's either flawed or whatever, then we've got, we got 10 other restaurants that just went and did the same thing. And that's that breaking those walls down of common commerce in a way that everybody wins if everybody can find the right way to kind of do things. And that's hard to do. And particularly in the middle of I'm using the word panic, really, a pandemic panic. In this case, with something like restaurants, the clock's ticking, right? We've got probably a few more weeks where people, I always joke that you won't sit outside with a parka and a hood on eating pasta. It's not going to happen. And so as these companies try to find that way, but that gets to sort of this opening up your eyes to sort of a partnering. With the time we've got left, since I want to transition, because both of you also have some feelings, I think, and that's on capital. I think that's an area where I know for sure, speaking from the Maryland Innovation Center and having conversations with virtually everybody, one of the things we're missing in our region here or in this area, we've got everything, incredible. We got the highest educated workforce, right? Literally in the county, if not in the Tri-County area. We've got the best school system in the state, if not, certainly competitive in the country. We've got Cyber Command, we've got one of the largest, target markets all here and all. And yet we do not have a great place for startups and even existing companies to really take advantage of what is more available in other areas of the country, whether we go up to the Northeast or across to the West Coast. And that's another example of, we kind of use partnering with your bank or partnering with a financial place. But Mohammed, I know you've had some experience, and you and I have had that conversation. I've had the conversation earlier, actually last night, with Anuja, where, we're going to try to get to kind of tackle that better. And I think that one of the sessions that maybe in the next week's session may cover this, but maybe some good conversations about that would be worthwhile for us to talk about, sort of like access to capital and sort of the needs there. Mohammed, I know you came from where you were, we're down in North Carolina and came up here, and sort of, I think you saw what we're seeing here is that it's just not there yet.
Yeah, I think, part of it, I think we've talked about this. Part of it is just, this it's a large metropolitan area, of course. You've got Northern Virginia, frankly, acting as a fairly decent competitor in terms of serving as a technology corridor. I think just based on my initial observations, I am new to the area, although I've lived in Northern Virginia well over 15 years ago, but it's been a while since coming back. And, my sense is I operate in the sort of private equity world, which is a little bit more established capital, looking at established businesses with a fairly, long running record of profitability. I think, the startup world obviously is a bit more focused on venture capital. My sense is that there are actually decent businesses, established businesses here that could probably capture more private equity. I know that there's actually, private equity capital that's focused on the government space in particular. And so they've been very active there. And I know they've been sort of active in investing and acquiring businesses, government-oriented businesses in Maryland. I think my sense on the venture capital side goes back to my previous comment on the technology corridor piece. I mean, Northern Virginia has done a really good job, I think, of creating those incubations, even connecting some of that federal business to that sort of startup world as well, right? A lot of those, like the Lockheed Martin, I mean, these companies are the Grummans of the world. They're tied into that whole ecosystem over there. So I guess, so I would categorize it to two separate things. Startups on one side, where I suspect that there's more runway there where we could develop. But on the private equity side, for established businesses, I see a tremendous amount of opportunity here, actually, particularly given the size of the established businesses that rely on government money, especially. So from a more mature capital standpoint, I think there's quite a bit of opportunities actually in Maryland to attract those investments.
And it's got to be more diverse. I think part of the challenge, one of the good and bad of us becoming sort of cyber central here, in other words, has been good because a lot of that funding and all has been driven into those cyber companies. I'll use the word cyber broadly here, but we'll say the security risk space. And yet there are some other non-traditional, non-technology focused innovations that are out there. I know in the Innovation Center, we've got 30 plus startups in there, and we've got a diversity of companies, of which I would say probably less than half of them involve anything coded. There's no coding. It may be a service, it may be something that's focused on an intangible, but it's got value, and getting the investment community aligned with that is sort of a challenge, because we just don't have that. That energy that, you're right, has closest to us is clearly Northern Virginia. Phil, I know you've worked aligning capital stuff up before too, and had some experience in this area.
Well, almost every one of my clients is in a constant money searching mode. I try to introduce them to people who I think have some money that they can, that where they might be interested. But it's hard. I mean, the companies that they don't just look around here. They got to go around the country and look for money. I think the one thing that comes to mind is the fund, I think, that's out of Maple on Data Tribe. Chuck, you're probably familiar with them.
Sure.
But other than them, and there might be some over in Towson that I'm familiar with. But other than Data Tribe, it doesn't seem like there's, at least I haven't experienced any, private equity or investment or angel investment that's, here in Maryland looking for these Maryland opportunities.
Yeah, I think it's out there. It's just, and I've had this conversation. It's out there. There's a lot of money parked on the side here. This is if we look, if we just look at it statistically, this is a very wealthy area, and there are a lot of people who kind of are on the sidelines. This would be more on the angel side, probably more than the traditional side, but it's an area that maybe needs more exploration, for us to kind of build that up, because that'll be the missing component, I think, ultimately, that'll stop the area from becoming, that next level, because in the end, we all know, both of us have had experience. It takes capital to do anything. It does in the end. And if you want to drive to that next level,
but Chuck, kind of an aside, and it's one area that I work in as well, is in the patent monetization world.
Yes.
There's a lot of money available now to enforce patents, and I guess what I would say to this group is, if you have a patent portfolio, but you don't know what to do with it, or don't have the money to do what you want with it, there is opportunity out there to seek funding and in a cost-free way to pursue enforcing the patents against infringers.
Yes, and in fact, Phil, I think you gave Phil has done a couple seminars with the Maryland Invention Center. We did one on patents that was well attended. That was an eye opener for me and a lot of other people, that most people hear patents and go, well, that's not me. And then the truth is, it's something that probably everybody needs to be aware of these days. And somehow I'm trying to tie this all back to partnering, and I guess it does. As we kind of we've got about 5 minutes left or so on this particular session, and I think we'll probably leave. I'm going to take a look and see if there, certainly while we're wrapping up here, people have questions. I'll leave it up to Leonardo, whether they post them in the chat box or whatever. But to kind of wrap up the sort of partnering thing, I think, I think what we're saying is you have to look at partnering is, both could be towards your customers, your finance people, certainly your even your competitors. And as you do that, it's a good time to kind of reevaluate your current ones. And that may mean also in fact reevaluating, probably the biggest one is with your customers, right? Because in essence, if you have a customer, you got a partnership with them, right? You give them something, they get something, and great time to reevaluate that. Mohammed, any other kind of closing thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just going to comment actually on this sort of the kind of point around the scarcity of capital. I mean, I think, I'm hoping that, there's been a lot of, in the past 2 decades, there's been a lot of capital focused in, the Boston area and the West Coast. I do think, Revolution Capital, Steve Case comes out of this area, sort of the broad DMV area. I do think there's a real effort now to try to see if we can really kind of support opportunity startups in places where traditionally that capital's not been made, immediately available. I think there is a real effort going on there. And it's just a matter of just really connecting to those networks that are very keenly focused on trying to distribute the capital in places like here, for instance, that are, not has not been paid the attention I think that this area deserves. And just connecting into that network.
That's a great point. And by the way, since you brought it up, you're gonna be tapped to help us do that, by the way. So you spoke too soon there. But Anuj and I had this same conversation last night. We were talking about capital, and you're exactly right. We need to build probably stronger conduits to where capital has existed before, and kind of bring those in, because if we just stick, in this little myopic circle ourselves, we don't have it here. We just don't have it.
I would also say that the change, I think, is that the other party, the counterparty, is also now very interested and enthusiastic, i.e. the investors themselves. They're interested in opportunities outside of their sort of bubbles, is right. What I think that's the big secular change. Right. I mean, we'll see, obviously, in terms of actual
So they're sort of pivoting also then, right?
Yes.
It would be one way to kind of wrap up the pivot conversation. Phil, any other kind of comments before we maybe get ready to turn this over on sort of where your portfolio is?
Yeah, Chuck, I would just end by reiterating that, strategic partnerships come in a lot of different flavors. And if your company has a need, you don't need to think that you need to do it all yourself. Come up with some ideas, pick up the phone, call some people who you think would be interested in working with you. And you make 10 phone calls, and one turns out to be a really nice strategic relationship that helps both companies.
Yep. And I think that's what, one of the challenges that I know that we're taking is to help kind of create the opportunity for companies to feel free to do that. And sometimes it means just bringing people together. And unfortunately, that's one of the downsides of this pandemic, is that's even harder to do now, is to get people focused to kind of, sort of that collaboration. So in a way, the opportunity that was created by COVID, and I say that not in a pleasant way, the downside is its limitations also forced where you would really, want to kind of be networking with a lot of people right now. And right now, people are pretty zoomed out, to put it bluntly. I think that's we are right on time here as I transition. So I'm going to ask Leonardo to. Oh, yes, Phil.
I just wanted to say I'm really glad that a fly didn't land on your head.
Hey, now, come on. Wait a minute. Yeah. Hey, hey.
If that happened, we might end up having Howard County Live.
No.
Have to go and see what we can come up with.
Hey now, all right. I wanted to thank Phil and Mohammed for helping me kind of do this and bring these insights in, and both of them. I think we'll have contact information if anybody wants to get a hold of them further to kind of talk things. And I'm hoping that we'll see a lot more of them in other events that we do, both through the chamber and through our own stuff. So I wanted to thank Phil and Mohammed.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate it.
And Phil and Mohammed also want to thank you, as well as Chuck. And now we're going to actually get ready and somewhat make another transition. And I think, we've talked a good bit about, innovation this morning. We've talked about pivoting and joint venturing. And ultimately, if we are to pivot, and ultimately, if we are to take on partners, and if our business changes or the model changes, how we communicate that to our clients as well as potential clients is certainly going to be something that's equally as important as the strategy behind what it is that we're offering now and how it is that maybe we're doing it differently. And so we're going to next have spend the remaining part of our time talking about marketing strategy. And specifically, we really kind of narrowed this down to some specific things that you can do and can implement kind of right at this moment moving forward. And so it is my pleasure to introduce to you Emily Dorr, who is the owner and creative director of the Postern Agency, as well as also Chris Vandergriff, who is the director of communications and production, both for Postern as well. And so a little bit about their respective backgrounds. So Emily has cultivated her expertise as a brand innovator and marketing strategist with 20 plus years of experience providing unparalleled consultative services and hands-on brand management and marketing strategy. Highly invested at every phase of service, Emily has assembled an exceptionally talented team of creatives and strategists to ensure her clients receive deliverables wonderfully redefined by diversity of thought, skill, and vision. With major marketing successes already to their name, Emily continues to lead Postern and their clients to new heights of excellence with proven results. And so again, this is Emily Dorr. And let's see, and then next, in terms of Chris Vandergriff, again, he is the director of communication and production. And with a background in consulting, a penchant for creative strategy, and a mind for production management, Chris believes meaningful communication is at the heart of bringing a client's goals successfully to fruition. At every phase of service, Chris's objective is to ensure that his clients are heard, their creative team is empowered, and their deliverables meet the high standards of excellence for which Postern is known. No matter the project, his ability to cast vision and anticipate barriers make Chris the ideal strategic advocate for his clients and creative team alike. And so with that, I'm going to turn the screen over to Emily and Chris to share 5 practical things you can do to bring attention to your business as we continue to navigate our way, I guess, through the pandemic and post-pandemic. So Chris and Emily, take it from here.
All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Bob, thanks, Chris. And then I'm going to share my screen momentarily, but thanks, Leonardo, and to all of you for having us today. As Chris and I started to approach this, we realized there are just some fundamentals to how people are marketing themselves right now. And rather than spread ourselves too thin, we focused on a few key areas we're seeing our clients and other companies be most successful. And those kind of focus areas are websites and e-commerce, social media, and then on the heels of the last conversation, events and collaboration. So I know we talked a lot about partnerships in that last session, but some of those collaborations or partnerships that you just heard about can ultimately become marketing material or marketing gold. Chris is with me today. I think you saw Amy's name on the screen. Amy's our director of community development, but Chris is here because he's been working firsthand with some of our clients and being strategic in these areas. So that's why I brought Chris with me today. But for me as the owner and creative director, just as a small business, I know intimately what everybody's been going through. Owners, even during normal times, have our own share of responsibilities that most people will never understand the stresses of, and COVID has really magnified those. So I'm there with any of the business owners that are on the call. But then as creative director of Postern, I, as you heard, just help develop our strategic approaches to marketing and ensure that everything that we do transcends the noise, because there is a lot of noise out there right now, which helps get our clients noticed and then of course delivers results. So kind of those two hats that I wear, business owner, and then my role here at Postern as the creative director leading our strategy. But I'll let Chris talk a little bit specifically about what he does.
Yeah, as director of communications and production, I'll start with the communications part of it. Really, it's about sitting down with clients and understanding basically what it is, what's the story they're telling, what is their business, what is it, what is the thing that they need to articulate to their audiences. So I get the wonderful privilege to sit down and dive into that and to really try to wrap our own heads around how should we be communicating about those things to the audiences that these particular clients have. And then I also get to the joy of managing all the projects as well. So I do production management, which is the less exciting part of what I do, but it just helps make sure that our creative team is on point, has what they need, and that our clients are getting some really exceptional work on the back end. So I'll just sort of introduce a little bit of how we formatted this presentation, just so you have an idea of the rhythm of it. We're going to do a little bit of a retrospective and say what happened. So when COVID struck, what were some of these shifts that we saw happening in marketing? We're going to talk about and actually quantify how some of these things have changed statistically. And then we're going to give some tips going forward for how you can adjust your marketing as well. Because the reality is we can talk post-pandemic, but we are still very much in the pandemic. And as businesses, the reality is some of these lingering effects will be, long-standing. So we want to give really practical tips to all of you that you can be using for months, years to come to help your marketing respond to everything that has happened. And we'll also provide some examples of businesses we've worked with and some of the successes that they've had in shifting their marketing.
All right, before I go any further, I'm just going to say that my video isn't starting. I'm not sure if you can activate me, Leonardo, but I am also the person running the slideshow on our end, so it might not be necessary.
Let's see, I'm not sure. I know we've got it on screen share, but I'm not sure on the video side if there's anything we can do.
Well,
Taylor, do you know?
There we go.
Okay. All
right. Okay, so my slides have advanced. Okay, so websites and e-commerce, that's where we're going to start it, with our top 3 different topics. We see websites as a means for information, and when we watch the shift to stay at home, that became a lot of traditional product and even service related companies. That was the new brick and mortar. So what happened? The routines have changed, and how, when, and where people are browsing has had some fundamental shifts. At first, people were stuck inside and they were looking for information, whether it be news information. That then led to what's happening in the places that they're normally going to, whether it's stores, grocery stores, restaurants. And that has caused a ripple effect that I don't think is going to be reversed anytime soon. People are going to be using where traditionally people may have picked up the phone to make a phone call. A lot of people have really shifted their information gathering to the internet. And they're looking in multiple places. So the website obviously is one. We'll get to social media in just a little bit. But it's just drastically increased so much that you have to ask your question. You ask the question, where are my customers right now? And how do I meet them there? And as things progress, the question has to be re-asked, because not just has your business changed, but so have people's behaviors. And so that question becomes a really important one as you're figuring out what to communicate online, especially on your website. And then behaviors have changed. What motivated people in 2019 looks really different now in 2020. So another question to ask is, how are my customers feeling right now? And fear and anxiousness and impatience is just more pervasive than ever in people's core buying behavior. What we're seeing is at the end of 2019, so many people were having stellar years, whether it be a business or even individuals. So whether you're B2B or B2C, this is a question you need to ask yourself: is how are my customers feeling right now? And to try to alleviate any of that anxiousness and impatience by providing them the information on your website that's most important. And for many, that meant e-commerce and putting e-commerce solutions in place, because one, the customer wanted the product, they needed a way to get to purchase the product in a safe way. And, curbside pickup became a thing for a lot of merchants as well as restaurants. But even the B2B, we had to figure out new ways to communicate what we were doing in operating our businesses. So there's definitely been a shift in values as well in terms of that luxury versus necessity, with some people's incomes being affected during the pandemic. Necessity has risen to the top, as where at the end of 2019, looking into 2020, people were probably planning vacations and things like that. And we've seen all of that kind of come crashing to the floor. And then just we've seen a trend in people looking at trusted brands versus new brands. They continue to want to invest their time and money in those trusted brands.
Yeah, and the transformation was really significant. And I mean, you probably experienced the shift in your own household, as many people on this call right now may have a child in the other room that's currently being homeschooled. You may be working from your living room. Your kitchen may be your new conference room. So a lot of things change with how people engage with the internet, because before we were finding pockets of time to scroll on our phone and peruse the internet and just get the basic information and move on. Well, people's ability to browse without their employer peering over their shoulder or without having interruptions from office mates and things like that, it increased. In fact, web browsing increased by as much as 25% in the spring. And now, while that's tapered off a little bit, just because people have started to get out and about a little bit more, some people have returned to their offices, 25% increase is substantial when you think about the fact that there's 4.5 billion people accessing the internet. So a 25% increase is massive. So when you think about the context of your business and people gaining access to you, there are that many more people going to your website and frankly having higher expectations. And even though the traffic's tapering off, this isn't going away anytime soon. What is it, like 60 some odd days to form a new habit? Well, we've had well more than 60 some odd days for people to form new web browsing habits. And so it's happened. So now their expectations of what was pre-COVID and has now become the COVID era of web browsing, that's here. And it's a behavior that's likely going to stay. Paralleling just the increased web browsing traffic is that e-commerce deliveries grew the equivalent of 10 years in 8 weeks. Think about that for a moment. Anything growing the equivalent of 10 years in 8 weeks is insane. Think about if technological advancements grew the amount of 10 years in 8 weeks. So that's what's happened with e-commerce delivery. So people leaning into e-commerce, it's an absolute necessity now. They say it'll make up 25% of retail sales over the next 5 years as compared to 15% in 2019. And buy online, pick up in store methodologies, curbside pickup. If you're a retail business, if you're a restaurant, you've probably become very closely acclimated to this. Those have increased 62% year over year. And again, these are newly established behaviors that are likely to continue even as we start to see transition out of some of these quarantine phases that we've experienced, like in March and April. So thinking about what lies ahead and how do you shift? Have you shifted? So we're going to talk about some things that we've seen that have been really successful for our clients and non-clients alike in this current environment. So first of all, make sure your web content is responsive to your customers' actual needs. As business owners, we always kind of want to show off our wares, our services, our products, what we've done. But once COVID occurred, that really shifted because people were getting online and wanting information. They need to know about access. They need to know how your operations were changing. So it's not about what you want them to know. It's about what they need to know. So it's really important to audit your website content and just make sure that that is reflecting what are your customers needing to know right now. Don't know what your customers want right now? Ask them. And I know that seems kind of obvious, and you can anecdotally hear from people or see comments on Facebook and whatnot to kind of get a sense of, what your audiences are looking for. But surveys are such an invaluable tool to use right now that you can be deploying across your social media channels. You could use Google Forms or something comparable to help really understand what is it that your customers need right now. How are they feeling and what do they need? Again, back to those questions to really understand what their core buying reasons are and how you should shift your marketing to meet those. And also, frankly, when you offer your customers a chance to speak into your business and how you're doing it, that creates loyalty. And that loyalty right now is what people are more prone to follow. So definitely ask the questions if you're not sure what it is your customers do in fact need. And analytics tell the story. If you don't have analytics on your website, if you don't have a way to track how your traffic is moving on your website, who is clicking what does the volume look like on given times of days of the week, things like that, super important to make sure that your website is equipped with analytics, because that's how you know where people's interests currently lie as it relates to your business.
Yeah, we've seen in working with a community bank that's both here in Frederick County and also Carroll County, and then up in Pennsylvania, we initially were working with them on strategy as things began to close down and what businesses were needing from them. And it was amazing that in being strategic one of our questions was, well, what are you seeing them doing on your website? And they hadn't even looked. I think it was that panic mode that we were all in at that time, where there was just so much to focus on. Even some of the basics people forgot. So don't ever forget to go back to your analytics because they definitely tell a story in themselves.
And frankly, your site needs to offer more than information. So once you have an understanding of your customers' current needs, once you're understanding kind of how they're feeling and what it is they're asking for, you now also have to create an experience. Even as restrictions ease, consumer habits they're actively being reconditioned. Again, I know I said that, but drive that home more and more. So now their expectations have never been higher for businesses to provide patrons unique access and exposure, frankly, to products and services. So we have some examples of some companies and how they shifted their website to actually be an experience either through the e-commerce format or even integrating things like virtual tours or virtual shopping into their website platforms. This is the experience that people are now going to expect going forward.
Right. With that became a lot of initially, and I'm sure everybody has seen this and continues to see this, is the pop-up windows and the banners on COVID communications, what's happening in stores, what's happening with their hours, things like that. That probably was initially the first thing that we as a business had to address for the clients whose websites we work on, and putting those pieces into place that might not have been there before. And so they can look pretty rudimentary or they can be pretty sophisticated. I'm going to show you some that are easily approachable and done by almost any level web experience, including some that one that probably got done in-house by the company. So Trail House is a local store downtown. You can kind of see a picture on their homepage. They pivoted their homepage pretty quickly to put up that message that's in the white there. And they continue to use that space there to put information on what's happening in the store. You can see, if you can read it, they've actually have updated hours posted there. So they're back to being open Monday through Sunday, which obviously that message is new because just a couple months ago, we couldn't be open during those times. So definitely something to implement and easy to take away when the time comes and you don't need it anymore, but it's a great way to communicate. You can also see on their site how they're showing how open and easy maneuverable their store is. I know specifically on the outside of the store, they've communicated how many people are also allowed in their store at any given, actually it says it in the message, they're only allowing 5 people in the store at any given time. So they're clearly showing you that 5 people in the store with their staff, which I've been in there myself. I think they have 2 employees at a given time. that 7 people in this store is not a very crowded store. And this picture doesn't show it, but they've even put down some social distancing stickers on the floor to show where you're supposed to stand in terms of, and how traffic is supposed to flow throughout the store. So this does really give the customer immediately a good feel for the experience if they want to enter the store. And then if you don't feel comfortable shopping online or shopping in the store, they also mentioned that you can now shop online. So they have that shop now link at the top, and they were able to set up very quickly a Shopify account and start to sell product online. So you can see women's boots here. And even in their Shopify account, they even have that green banner across the top that talks more about a little bit more about some of the curbside pickup available and free shipping as well. So you can see a store that's a rather small store that was able to pivot, I use that word, to this, to having an e-commerce store when they're a 35-year-old store and have never even thought about putting their product online. So they were able to set this up. They started loading content probably within about 3 weeks of closing. And I'll also say they went through an ownership transition at the same time. So the poor new owner also, took over the store about a month before COVID happened. So this is a very traditional e-commerce solution and very traditional messaging solutions for your COVID messaging. What we've also seen is some unconventional things. We've helped some clients pivot themselves. And one of them on the left-hand side here, District Arts, is a gallery, a contemporary art gallery with price points in the range of $200 to $2,000, maybe even more. And so this kind of leans to that luxury side and probably isn't the thing that people are going to purchase online, but in an attempt to keep people, one, entertained during the early months, while also showing off their gallery that had to be closed down. Our team put together, before they were told to shut down, we ran over there with video cameras and shot the entire gallery. And over the course of about 2 months until they were able to open again, we put together short videos of what was in the gallery, and you could call and make purchases. And so while they've definitely had a difficult time, like many small businesses, those videos really helped them showcase the artwork that was in the gallery at the time. And then the other thing that we did was show videos of the artists working on their pieces before they went into the galleries. And so this was something where we worked closely with the artists and telling them how to shoot their video, and they did it themselves and then uploaded video online. So definitely some ways to engage, entertain, and then also continue to sell your product there. And then and then of course those can be put up on the website as well as social media. So now you have both social media content for your website, and a way to sell the product in the store or in the gallery. On the right-hand side is even less it's probably the least traditional, and I will say they're definitely clothing store that is targeting a younger demographic. So they're not necessarily needing the traditional shopping experience online. And so what Velvet Lounge has done is they've actually used their Instagram account. They did not put up a traditional store, but these are actually their employees modeling the clothing that's, you can see it's fall clothing now, but they started this early on where they were doing home delivery. So while people were waiting, the employee was waiting in the store, they would try on the clothes, take pictures, post it to their social media. And then people would literally call and say, I want that brown sweater in a size small, and here's my address. And so that's how they did their online transactions. So 3 super different ways to approach putting your product online, and 3 that are highly successful. Velvet Lounge doesn't have any plans to put a traditional e-commerce site up. This seems to be working for them. District Arts is open again. Definitely, we're still doing the videos because they do have clientele that aren't comfortable coming into the store. And so they're appreciative that they can look at the videos and see what's in the store. And then of course, Trail House, who put up your very traditional e-commerce store through a Shopify tool. And so 3 total transformations into how they were communicating what was in their store that they had, all 3 of them have never done before. So you can make it definitely 3 different approaches and each one unique to their audience as well. I think they all 3 handled it well based on their audience. So I think that's kind of the conclusion of our websites and e-commerce. We obviously continue to see people updating their banners of information, refining some of these online tools and promoting them on social media. And so I think that's a great transition into our social media topic. So with social media, we see it as a means of communication. We talked about information on the website and now more of a communication and that window to humanity. So what happened? The prolonged time at home, did I miss? There we go. The prolonged time at home created that content void. So that example of the district arts videos was a great example of providing content in that void. And so those who recognized it have flourished, and those who did not floundered. We have talked to so many businesses about not going silent. Now we've seen since March, April, May, that's when people tended, if they were questioning what to do, that's when they were silent. We've seen many of those people who went silent come out of that, but definitely the people, even restaurants that we've talked to, those who shut down and then shut down their social media as a result of closing temporarily, had a lot harder time coming back online and being successful with bringing patrons back because of that shutdown of social media. So social media really shifted from being a business luxury to an absolute necessity. Just the information that needed to be communicated was important, and that's where people were spending a lot of time because they were looking for that entertainment. So it became a great place to share your shift into home delivery or curbside pickup. And then also just seeking entertainment and comfort became a shift in the users' habits and people wanting to be entertained. We've seen libraries shift to book readings online, where that kind of thing happened in the libraries themselves. And people just became more interested in the human experience. We've seen a growth of 200% in our clients needing social media services. And with that, but we've watched even a growth in TikTok. One of the examples, TikTok is, I think anytime a new social media tool comes online, some people become apprehensive. Some people are really early adopters trying to figure out if it's going to take off. But TikTok, as you have heard, is, in national news and has become a place that people are escaping to for that entertainment. But we've seen people be really innovative in how they're using it, including we have a nonprofit client who addresses sexual and domestic violence. And they're sharing content there because they know, unfortunately, victims of domestic violence are also stuck at home with their abusers. And this is one way for them to communicate how to access their services. So while TikTok might all seem like an escape tool, we're watching clients use it as a successful marketing tool.
So talking about kind of the transformation, what that looks like from a quantifiable standpoint, between March and early May, about 46 to 51% of US adults said that they were using social media more since the outbreak began. Again, people are at home. They just had more time to scroll. And that goes back to Emily's points about that content void, is that it's not only, it was this, dual effect that was happening. More people were scrolling and getting into social media, as the stats are saying, but at the same time, many businesses receded with their social media presence. So again, there was these voids in content, but more people were on than ever before. They say that in 2020, as compared to 2019, US adult social network users will spend 7 more minutes per day on social media. Now, 7 more minutes doesn't sound like a lot. And I mean this both as a joke, but also in all seriousness, like how much shopping can you do in 7 minutes on Amazon? Like you can handle a lot of purchases and a lot of scrolling in 7 minutes. So a 7-minute increase in social media usage means a lot for getting people access to your products, because that could be, that much more of a revenue stream happening in those 7 minutes of social media browsing. And social media ad spends right now are expected to grow by 9.8% in 2020. Now, before everything happened, it was anticipated to be more than 9.8%, but it's amazing because every other single type of advertising ad spend right now is in dramatic decline. From more conventional advertising methods like billboards, print, things of that effect. The reality is the only thing that is still growing as far as ad spends right now is social media ad spends. And I think that says a lot. So as we're transitioning into tips for what lies ahead, I think a lot of businesses found this the hard way. Don't be caught again without a social media strategy. The surge in usage will definitely taper off a little bit. But again, back to the idea that there is now new social media browsing habits. And as these businesses like Emily was showcasing earlier, they've already adapted. They have found ways to move their products and services and to highlight their company culture more effectively across their social media platforms. So that will continue to be the expectation, is more content and more, frankly, enriching content. And when you come up with your strategy, a great first step is to create a content calendar and set measurable goals. Look, it doesn't have to be anything extremely complicated. I think set some realistic benchmarks for yourself in terms of what's the frequency of posting you want to do. 2 to 3 times a week. If you're only doing once a week, try 2 to 3 times a week. Come up with that schedule. Decide what days of the week that you're going to post on. Come up with content themes. It's fantastic if you can spread out those, say, 3 posts a week and go, hey, on this day, I'm going to feature a product. On this day, I'm going to feature our team. And on this day, I'm just going to give a general business update. With that type of really simple intentionality, you can make sure that should we find ourselves in a really dramatic business shift one way or another again in the foreseeable future, that you'll be ready with some semblance of a plan and have that continuity where your customers and your audiences know that they can rely on you for that regular stream of content. And again, you don't have to overcomplicate things, just aim for consistency. That's really going to be key for your operations and for your audiences. And then a little Facebook and Instagram advertising can go a long way in finding the right audience. So if you haven't used any advertising on Facebook and Instagram, you can get very granular with the demographics of who you're trying to reach. So as you're looking at your marketing budgets, which everybody absolutely is right now, and you're trying to figure out where do you put money behind ad spends, looking at traditional versus digital advertising and whatnot, you can go a really long way through doing advertising on social media and boosting posts to make sure that you're getting the right geographic area, that you're getting the right age demographics, that you're capturing the right interests that people have. Again, it's a really strategic way and a really affordable way to go about advertising what's happening with your business.
I'd also say that for the B2B, LinkedIn is an important place where probably more so than ever have created more LinkedIn campaigns during this time for businesses as that are trying to reach that other business to business market. So while Facebook and Instagram works really well for the community engagement and for small businesses like the small merchants and restaurants, LinkedIn obviously for the B2B consumers.
And just as important as being engaging, yes, we can entertain all day. We can talk about products and services. We can do funny TikTok dances and all that. But most importantly, your content should be authentic. Isn't good marketing just about telling a really good story? And at the end of the day, you, your business, your team, it's a story to be told, and everyone's story just got really unique with COVID. So tell your story and be authentic about it. Let your audience know the current status of your business and what your aspirations are. If you're looking at COVID and saying, hey, we're pulling in a little bit right now with our products and services, but guess what? Our aspirations are for 2021. This is what we want to be doing. Get your customers and your audiences like rallied behind that, and get your own teams excited about it by talking about that on social media. Even if you can't promise a lot to your customers right now, then just bring them into the journey. Keep them informed of real-time changes in your operations. So, post photos of your physical space if there's changes there. Take photos, post video of new products and services. If there's new staff hires or anything like that, make sure that you're talking about that. Bring them into any changes that are happening with your operations. And be transparent about the challenges that you're facing. You're not going to sit there sharing P&Ls with your customers about the real state of things. But what you can do is be empathetic. And that's such a huge part of marketing, especially when we're in the middle of the turmoil that we are. Empathy will go an extremely long way to, first of all, let your customers know, hey, you're authentic, you're sincere, and frankly, that you're in this together. And that goes back to this brand loyalty of being recognized as a loyal partner. You need to talk about that in your social media.
So now we're going to show you a specific example of a client that is a creamery here in Frederick County, a very large operation. Actually, they not only are they operating their dairy farm for the last 20 years, they have a home delivery service as well as a store on site where you can pick up, and then that has its own agritourism component to it. But what happened with the during the onset of COVID, as we all know, you went into the grocery store and meat shelves were empty, and just kind of the things that you needed for your family were hard to find. So what they saw was a drastic increase in home delivery service. And so with the drastic increase, they knew they needed to be smart about their marketing communications. So they engaged us, and one of the first things we did was put that content calendar together. We also got to know them very well over a course of several months and help them. One of the things that we do when we're establishing a content calendar is we also establish themes, because themes for posts make it even easier for you to determine what you need to post, what you haven't posted about recently that fits into one of those themes. And you can even use days of the week to post each individual's theme. So for example, some of the things that they post about are what's happening on the farm. They post about products, and they post about the farmer, the family, because they're a second generation farm family, where both generations are still operating the business, and they talk about their products themselves. So those three categories, so the farmers and the family, what's happening on the farm, and products, all, oh, something happened to my screen. Are you guys still seeing my screen? Okay. I can't. So I'm just going to hope that I can get back. There we go. Okay. So let's see, let me get to the next slide and hope it doesn't go too far. So for South Mountain Creamery, there we go. You can see, and this is really straight up out of Facebook social media posts. One of the things that happened as they grew during this time, another opportunity became available to them, and that was to buy Trickling Springs Creamery and Dairy that shut down last fall in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. They had already shifted to 2 shifts where they had a night shift producing milk overnight. They didn't have 2 cow shifts. But they had 2 people shifts. So that was all they could do to max out their current operation. And they were sourcing milk from other farms. And so this allowed them to expand their operations significantly. And they still have capacity to expand that operation. It also allowed them to purchase the rights to the organic label from Trickling Springs Creamery, as where South Mountain Creamery's products are not necessarily organic. Again, back to those themes, this is that family theme. You can see that on the right. The people is always a theme for so many clients. Chris talked about, what's happening in the office. We've also seen a lot of people show up with what's happening in people's home offices. So we always see a lot of engagement when people are posting about, or businesses are posting about their people. And then of course, one of the things to note on social media is being appropriate with your photography. So you can see on the left-hand side, that's a Trickling Springs employee being rehired by the owner of South Mountain Creamery. They're very social distanced. You can also see in the middle how, normal operations, they'd probably just have to wear a hairnet, but now everybody's wearing face masks during production. And then on the right-hand side, it's okay that all those people are together because they're all related to each other. Just the importance of—
Yeah, sorry, Emily. And I'll mention that social media has become a minefield for non-COVID compliant imagery. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But as you'll see here, and Emily pointed out, there is risk in posting content to your social media that doesn't look COVID friendly because commenters will not hesitate to call it out when they see it. And then you have the difficult choice of, do you delete the comment? Do you engage with the person? Do you explain the situation? Do you open up a can of worms that you weren't prepared to open in the first place? So during this time, it is really important to be conscientious about your imagery on social media.
Yeah, and then, so some of the other imagery that they share is product related. Again, you can see beautiful product. And then also one more, what's happening on the farm. Everybody says when in doubt, put a cat or a dog in it. These guys have unending supply of animals to share. But I think the other thing is, Chris talked about being authentic, but when you grow so fast, like the growth that happened with this company, it's important to share your culture. And I think this really does share the culture of the business, from the family-oriented nature, trying to bring back employees that were let go in September and haven't had jobs since last year, let alone during COVID, and then just the wholesome product that they carry. Just a factoid here on their growth. They've had to expand warehouse space in real estate. We know that warehouse space is one of the hot commodities these days because of the online ordering. And they have also had to grow by 15 delivery trucks and drivers during this time. So you can imagine how big the growth is. And they have over 7,000 people on their waiting list for home delivery service. So having a very coordinated marketing effort online, both in their website and social media. And I'll one step further is this is their public social media. If you're on their home delivery service, they also have a delivery service group where you can talk to one another, and even they use it as, they have a call center, but they also see a lot of people using it as if they have customer service issues. So that's just another thought to how you're operating on social media, that groups have important role in your social media. So I know we don't have much time, and we have one more topic to get through, and that's events and enrichment. And I know we heard the last session talk about events and collaboration. So we see events as a means of collaboration. And you heard that partnership also used. I'll use that interchangeably with collaboration. But what happened with events was, the face-to-face events were the lifeblood of many businesses. 85% of leaders and executives had identified in-person events as a critical for their company's success in 2020. And COVID literally closed the doors on in-person meetings. And so with that went customer attraction, education, and retention. So how do you do that during a time when you can't get together? And we saw a lot of transformation happening there. The stats on transformation are, we saw 93% of event planners, event marketers plan to invest in virtual events moving forward. Here we are on a virtual event today. We've also seen the shift to hybrid events as well. I'm just going to cruise through these and not reread what's on screen, so we're cautious of our time and get to more of the tips. And so with that, I'll just kind of turn it over to Chris with the tips.
Yeah, so in thinking of events, obviously, anyone who has a business right now has already weighed this. So I don't want to talk about this as a late to the game approach. You know, we're looking at virtual, in-person, or a hybrid of the two. But what I do want to bring to mind is some of the important questions to be asking when exploring this. And first of all, it's the right tools. And when you're trying to decide between virtual, in-person, or hybrid from a marketing standpoint, it's important to ask the basic question, what are you trying to accomplish? And some of these, what sound like simple questions, are the ones that in the middle of a global pandemic are easy to overlook and forget to ask ourselves as businesses. So for events, again, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to gain, new business inquiries? Are you trying to connect with existing customers? Are you trying to showcase new products and services? Because all those from an event standpoint look very different. And I don't believe there's a one size fits all, like we're going to shift everything to virtual events. Well, that's nice, but a virtual event might not work well if you're trying to showcase a new product that is maybe hard to articulate or showcase over a virtual event. The other questions you need to ask yourself is, how many people does this event need to support? Obviously, some formats will be better for smaller or larger numbers, but that's another consideration. We found in some of our experiences that, we had some nonprofits wanting to do online auctions and fundraising events, and they realized with the number of people that they wanted to attract, it required a whole new set of logistics on the back end of their website, on the software and the programs that they were using to actually host the event, that then required licensure and different things to do so. So it's really important to bear in mind, like, how big you actually want this to be. Just an open invitation may not always be the best approach. And don't just pick the easiest or most accessible tool, but choose the right tool that's going to fit for your goals, and also choose the right tool that's going to accomplish what you want to accomplish in a safe way. Also, when thinking about, doing events, redefine your key performance indicators. So how are you measuring success now? Before it might have been, I'm going to have someone with a clicker figuring out how many people are coming through the door, and that's how we're going to figure out, what an event, whether it's successful or not. No, now you need to look at it and go, we're measuring success based on, is it number of attendees? Is it inquiries resulting from your meetup? Is it just new sales generated? So make sure as you're planning an event, not only ask the question, what are you trying to accomplish, but establish those KPIs so that you can look at it and decide, hey, these metrics panned out. This was a successful event. If it wasn't a successful event, I know this is the buzzword, pivot again, pivot one more time just for good measure. Do not be afraid to keep adjusting. Marketing is experimentation in motion. I mean, it really is. So if you're finding that something's not working, think about it, reassess your goals, and pivot. And obviously finding the right partner is huge. Reciprocity is going to be key. You need to know that you're going to put in just as much work as your partner is going to. It's like back to the days of high school or college having to do a group project. You want to make sure you have someone in your group that's going to carry their weight. So make sure you're really intentional about who you are choosing. And then the great benefit of doing that is you have an opportunity to leverage access to their audience. Some examples I thought of, are you a florist? Find a wedding venue to co-host with. Are you a restaurant? Get a great brewery to do a pairing event. Are you a clothing boutique? Find a partner with an outdoor venue space that you could do an outdoor, fashion show. Like, think about who is the right partner, not just from the reciprocity standpoint, but how can we leverage these complementary audiences? Because that means more social media followers for you, access to new potential customers. It is really important to find that right partner and make sure that they have access to an audience that's going to complement but be different than your own. And lastly, it's a chance to split the budget. So make sure your partner is willing to split the budget. This is a great time to explore those options, given everyone's tightening their belt with their marketing budgets. And then around the events, regardless of your format, consistent proactive communication is going to be key. Communicate your plan for things like refunds, cancellations, distancing protocols, and do it across all your platforms. Don't single in on just Facebook or just Instagram. Do it on your website, do it on all your social media platforms, put signage in your windows, get your partners in the event to share your content. So make sure that you're getting, that there's equity in what is being communicated across what platforms. And if it is in person, share photos of your distancing efforts. If you're taking steps to make sure that an event is safe for everybody, make sure you're showcasing that. That'll inspire confidence in those who would be potential attendees. And as we mentioned moments ago, content matters. Don't pick imagery and promoting and marketing your event of people high-fiving, people hugging, people sitting really close to each other. I feel like, I say that and it seems obvious, but in this time we have seen a whole lot of social media content going up, not from our clients, but from people that are sharing such imagery, and people are going to remember that. And it's going to cause concern for them as to whether they want to be a collaborator or even an attendee at your event. And avoid language that might give them cause for concern. Avoid hype words like sellout crowd, well attended. All those things may be true, but they don't necessarily convey a tone that's going to inspire confidence. So be really intentional about your language. If you need another set of eyes on your copy, make sure someone else in your office or on your team looks at it and ask yourself the question, would you want to attend this event hearing this thing? And then speak about your events as opportunities to enrich or forget. And I say that enrichment is huge because people have time right now that they didn't have before to grow. So if you can offer an opportunity to teach something, to help someone glean new insights, to help them better understand your industry, your product, or what you do in your community, invite them into that enrichment opportunity. Or maybe it's just fun for the heck of it. So invite them into that too. If it's something that helps them regain a sense of normalcy, then they'll want that. So think about, am I offering them an enhancement opportunity? Am I offering people a chance to forget what's going on, or at least to feel, some semblance of normalcy? Our example for this is we have a great brewery we work with, Monoxy Brewing Company, and I can hardly think of what goes better than beer and ice cream. Honestly, I attended this event as an attendee, and I tell you, beer and ice cream is fantastic together, and it doesn't sound like it would be, but it was. But Monoxy has a large tasting room space. They have a great outdoor green space, but obviously they were just as stymied by anyone else in terms of the number of people that they could have in any space. So they wanted to fully leverage the physical space they had, but they needed to do it in a really programmed and intentional way. South Mountain Creamery, client that we just mentioned in the previous example, they had fantastic ice cream, and it was summer and 90 degrees, and they wanted to get their ice cream out there, and they wanted more people to be aware of it. But you had the problem that people weren't going to grocery stores as much. So there was like a mutual need there between Monoxy Brewing needing to get people in their tasting room in a controlled way. And then there's people needing to get access to ice cream, which I think is a worthy cause if there ever was one. So it was a wonderful partnership between the two businesses because they had mutual needs. They were able to meet those mutual needs. And the pairing was perfect because it was a totally controlled environment. But as far as marketing success, what they did really well is they communicated clearly about the guidelines observed for the event. They controlled the number of available tickets and communicated as much. They said, hey, this is a limited event, so get your tickets now, which was to their benefit because it's sold out. They co-branded and co-tagged their marketing. So any collateral they made, digital or print or anything like that, had both their brands on it. They were linking each other's businesses. So there's that cross-platform collaboration where they gain new followers and audiences, and then eventually, hopefully, customers as a result of it. And they generated excitement about it, but they did it in a really relatable and reasonably cautious way. So they weren't being irresponsible about how they approached it. So two brands that I think did a fantastic job collaborating on an event that was highly successful and just marketed extremely well.
We'll skip the key takeaways because I know we're super over time. So if anybody has any questions, I am gonna stop sharing my screen so I can see people and see the chat.
Yeah, any questions on any of what we've covered, or even not related, just a general marketing question any of you have as business owners?
Just to comment, this is Phil Florenzo. We use South Mountain Creamery and have done so for about 15 years now.
Phenomenal. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, they have amazing products.
They've done a lot of their own pivoting too. If you're ordering from them, you've seen some of their pivots is not allowing people to order individual products, but shifting to packages. So they have meat packages, they have produce packages. It's allowed them to kind of shift their business operations. It becomes a marketing piece that needed to have on our end to promote to their home delivery, but it also became a way for them to do a lot better with inventory control. Because I think early on during the growth, they were seeing, products run out and being a little bit unreliable themselves. And so some of those internal shifts really worked well for them.
Leonardo?
Sorry, guys. Leonardo had to jump, and so do I. But I just wanted to say, thanks to the Chamber and for putting this together with us and all of our panelists. Great content, and the moderators. Good job for drawing that content out. Hopefully everybody had a good learned some good stuff. Really appreciate everyone giving their time to help our small business community. And we will see you next week as we continue in the progression of the small business series for the next two the Wednesdays of October. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you.